Far in the North Woods, on the borderlands between North Tyrone and Arcide Shamandala borderlands, lies a large log lodge under ancient trees called Euphonna's Retreat. It had started as a simple hunting lodge built by Brander Tyrone, who often came to hunt in these woods as a young man. But the large square lodge's main house had grown porches and other rooms, additions and upstairs floors and balconies, all made of the forest trees around them. Over the decades, it had continued to grow and expand until it was actually four tall, three-story lodges with an open courtyard in the center. Brander used his many Tyrant troops to add to the old hunting lodge and transformed it into a mansion of many wooden rooms. Its thick, dark beams and polished, knotty pine walls and wood casings and panelings were rustic but rich. There were porches on 2 floors that wrapped all around the 4 buildings, and a lovely central courtyard that was open to the sky and filled with paths and fruit trees and flower beds and gazebos that filled the square courtyard in the center of the 4 connected lodges. The lodges were built on a peninsula that jutted out into the large lake that shone through the trunks and leaves of the thick old soaring pines, oaks, and maples that surrounded the grounds and gardens. The sparkling lake views from inside the dark wooden rooms shone through many large window panes and from screened-in porches. The air was wet and fresh with the mist from the flowing waters, rippling in waves, and the sky reflected in the lake, looking like a mirror when it was still. It was all a sumptuous feast for the eyes, in different weather and under always changing and various skies. The lake was a divinely inspired watercolor painting, a great masterpiece of nature, painted on the infinite canvas of water and ever-changing light. Far to the north, beyond the Corellic Empire, were mountains of tree-covered slopes that rose higher and higher into the many mountain chains of the north. Many wide rivers ran down from these woodsy hills to feed the fertile woodlands of North Tyrone. These rivers flow quick and strong over many waterfalls and lakes to wind their way eventually to the cities, towns, villages, farms, and fields that lead eventually to the southern sea. Many decades ago, the Brander Tyrone used to hunt in his Lomar woods on the northern border of his royal family's vast lands. Brander was an old soldier and a great war leader who had built the greatest land force on the mainland to rival even the imperial navies of Pentuliax, emperor of all Corellia in those days. One day, on a hunt, he happened to run into a wandering company of Shamandala who could be found in these woods in those days, wandering south sometimes out of their northern forests. These were mystical folk who were once the lords and ladies of these forests, but were driven out long ago during the Dark War of Wensia, the founder of the Corellic Empire. These lands had since been occupied and settled by the various royal houses of the Corellic Empire in waves of settlements, starting 500 years ago with the frontier house of Vandermast and the Clayhorns, and later by the Tyrants. The original Tyrant lord had been a general under Wentz that won great renown in the Dark War, and was rewarded with the title Grand Duke and given a huge land grant by Wentzia herself. But that was many centuries ago now, and a lonely Grand Duke Brander Tyrant rode his great horse through the trees, seeking the solace of the woods to ease and distract his broken heart from the loss of his wife in childbirth to his son Helder 10 years ago. As he rode, looking through the trees on this particularly cool, sunny, and fine fall day, he felt a presence before he saw her. A beautiful Shamandala woman, dressed in brown deerskin, with long blonde hair floating on the breeze. She had a band of woven green leaves in her hair, and tall, long feathers hung down from the band. She was delicate and very tall, with strong, long legs. It appeared she did not hear him as he rode through the trees looking for game. Her eyes were half closed, and she was dancing through the thick trunks of the eldest of trees in this virgin wood. Her walk was gentle and yet proud too, and he thought her movements much too graceful to be called walking. He slowly came closer, and she stopped frozen at the sight of this large, dark man mounted on his huge black horse. Brander dismounted and smiled to disarm her, and looked down into her flawless face. But it was when he saw those strange, large Shamandala eyes that he fell instantly in love. Was she one of the four goddesses, the daughters of the Shamandala, come to life? He thought as he fell into those bright blue, large Shamandala eyes. They were elongated and slanted upward with arched eyebrows above them. They were larger and longer than any human eye Brander had ever seen. He had never actually seen a Shamandala before, and he marveled at how very different they were from the Hardekans, the ancient name of the race of the brown-skinned, dark-haired, and brown-eyed people that made up most of the citizens of the Koralic Empire. He bowed before her, laying down his bow and his sword. "I am Brander Tyrant," he said, speaking softly in hushed tones of amazement at her beauty. "Grand Duke of Tyrant, and Lord of all these lands." Brander was very large and tall, and she looked up at him with that face, childlike and ancient at the same time. Her delicate cheekbones seemed to glow in the light of the morning's blue sky that shone above the high branches and leaves of the trees above them. Pools of yellow sunlight shone down on her through a clearing in the green roof of leaves. Her delicate, unadorned beauty melted all Brander's pride, and her eyes, so uniquely blue in color, and so open and so full of curiosity and wonder, pulled him down toward her, and without thinking, Brander took her in his arms and kissed her thick and sensuous lips. When Brander opened his eyes after the long and hot kiss, he became instantly aware that he had been transported in his mind to another reality. He found himself in a kind of realistic dream vision outside the normal flow of time. It was an instant suspended, frozen by pure bliss, where time itself had stopped. He was embracing her in a green, unending expanse of grass. The sweet smell overwhelmed him, and he found himself flying above the thick scented flowers, some that towered over them like trees with giant colored petals for leaves, pink, yellow, blue, and red. And he was shocked to find that they were no longer even human. Brander didn't know how, but he knew he was flying because of wings on his back. Brander saw her beside him as a blue fairy woman, naked and lovely, with the same long blonde hair and body, with that impeccable, lovely face, but in a delicate blue body that floated on the air by the fluttering of dragon wings. He looked down and saw that he too had been changed into this wondrous being, and the world they lived in was magical, and Brander's heart exploded in being tall and beautiful himself, a childlike but ageless, immortal being, filled with childlike wonder, innocent, sensual passion, and a deep and profound love. Brander could not know that his mind was being taken over by the great psychic powerful force of the Shamandala, and that his passionate kiss was answered with this miracle of blissful being on some fantastic realm of existence. This fairy realm was just a Shamandala's way of saying, I like you too. They made love in this vision among the flowers, flying and floating together through the endless afternoon. Brander called her Euphonna, which means angelic song in the old speech of which Brander was a student, the long dead language of the imperial court used by Wensia long ago in her time. Though they would only meet once a year from that day on, Brander loved her for the rest of his life. He showed no other outwardly sign of change, but he never forgot this afternoon and began to see a more spiritual side to his life. He soon gave up his sword to his son Helder and retired from active service and began to groom Helder to rule after him in Brander's time. And 1 year later, on his next full hunt, the Shamandala elders themselves appeared to the Grand Duke when he was alone, separated from his hunting party. In another very dreamlike vision, Brander was presented a newborn son, a blond-haired, blue-eyed boy, so rare in the dark-skinned and black-haired Coralics. In his mind, Brander saw a vision of Euphonna come to him surrounded by the elders. This is our son, she said in halting speech, as if unused to talking. He cannot live among my people, for his mind cannot speak to us. We do not use words, but speak in thought. Please take him to his people, but come here at this time of year with him to visit with me. Brander looked into the lovely face of the small child, and the old warrior burst into tears of joy and wonder. Our son, he said feebly as he took the child in his arms. When he recovered himself, Euphonna and the elders were gone. He was again alone in the woods with his newborn second son, whom he named Kelder, which in old speech meant a very successful hunt. Brander then set about expanding the hunting lodge into a great rustic mansion in the woods, where 4 rivers converged out of the mountains in a churning pool. He called it Euphonna's retreat and spent much time there when his duties allowed. The old Grand Duke loved his second son, and more often he left his dukedom in the hands of his oldest son and advisers, and retired to Euphonna's retreat with Kelder to raise him far from the court in Aslef or the tyrant castle in Durandhaven, to live close to Kelder's people, the Shamandala, under the ancient trees they worshipped most. He renamed the woods Count Kelder's Woods, and when he came of age, he gave the lodge to his son. But Kelder would hide his Shamandala origins and shun the woods and never come to live or even visit the lodge after his father had passed. So it had been the perfect place for Tenor Songweaver to retreat to after being wounded by Kelder Tyrant in the famous duel which eventually took Master Bard Tenor Songweaver's life. Bard Megalier Starweaver and Lord Lucius Babe Clayhorn, newly named a Coralic Bard Starseed, brought their wounded master here to recuperate after his head wound by Kelder's sword. But both bards were soon to see their master's body transformed magically into clear crystal as Tenor's great soul returned to the realms within to continue the eternal journey back to oneness with the light. That crystal statue now stands in the great garden outside the woodsy mansion. Babe had stayed at the retreat long after Megalier had returned to Aslef. He was there now, sitting high above the mansion on a steep hill, overlooking the river valley below, where the mansion stood beneath the trees on the slopes of the pool, where the 4 great rivers meet. Actually, it is 2 rivers that flow into and out of the large lake. It had been 2 decades since the faithful duel, but Bard Starseed, Babe's bardic name, could see it in his mind's eye as if it were yesterday. Flashing in the bright midday sun, Tenor wielded his master's true sword, Thamboradran, the dragon cleaver, handed down to Master Tenor. The magical sword of Lomi and Silvertongue, the warrior bard of Wensia's court long ago. Count Kelder Tyrant had his family sword and his unseen magical scepter. When the swords first met, ringing out, Kelder used the unseen scepter to explode in a flash of red astral light, blinding the Master Bard. Without honor or mercy, Kelder brought his sharp, polished sword down, cutting into the blessed head of one of the greatest living lore masters of Celestion, and bringing down the true and the just with dark powers. Old Uncle Tenor, family friend of the tyrants, would die of his wounds a year later to the day, and Count Kelder would go on to hide his many sins and his illegal Kobe warriors until he was handed justice by the Star King and Wensia II. Sitting by his fire outside his small cabin, Babe Starseed Clayhorn was thinking about Mandolare and thinking about the past. After 20 years, the isolated retreat had grown in size, and a small city of tents and cabins had begun to surround the grounds as the Earth Children and others came to the lodge to honor Tenor Songweaver's crystal statue and stayed to live in the magical woods by the ever-churning pool. Euphonna's retreat became crowded as a pilgrimage site, as many also came to see to the needs of the pilgrims. The lodge became a kind of inn or hostel, and shops were built and tents set up all around the grounds and forests. Lord Babe Starseed Clayhorn had become a kind of celebrity to the many folk that came from all around the mainland to see the statue and enjoy the music, food, and shops that sprang up all around and along the pilgrimage route. The Earthchild movement had brought a new cultural renaissance of folk music, art, theater, and literature all across the mainland, and Euphonna's retreat became a spot for the celebration of it all, and Tenor Songweaver was its patron saint. The Master Bard and his apprentices, Mandolare and Cedar Startune, along with the Clayhorns, supported and protected the Earthchild movement through many troubled years where the wealthy and powerful sought to stamp it out before it could take root. Those forces were still out there, looking for some way to stop the changes, but the movement had grown anyway, and it looked like it was going to not only take root, but prosper and bear fruit. Babe had built his own cabin on this high hill far from the music and the shops and the crowds. It was very near the ancient shrine of the Shramandala goddess Ayala, goddess of the woods and fields, near in fact to the clearing where Billy Dillon first encountered her when he fell out of the sky many years ago. Babe was troubled by a reoccurring dream he had been having these past few nights. As he stared into his fire, he saw it again. Aslef was burning, and Babe was watching it. Out of the fire came a bright white orb, and Lord Billy Dillon was carrying it as he burned away to a blackened cinder in the flames. But instead of screams, Lord Dillon shouted gladly, "A new star is born in the heavens," he said, and then he fell into a heap of ashes. What could it mean? Babe wondered as he put another log on the fire, for the summer was soon passing as the days grew colder. The trees were turning, and the wind was blowing through their green leaves, showing hints of their true colors. The fire burned brighter as the light faded from the sky for another day. Babe then heard footsteps coming toward him from the path that led down to the lodge, and soon one of the Earth Children appeared, dressed in their hemp uniform of many tie-dyed colors, with a long beard and longer hair, bedecked with feathers and beads in the Shamandala fashion. "Lord Starseed," the young man said, "Master Bard, Destiny Dreamweaver, has arrived to see you. He is below and is now being refreshed. Shall I send him up?" "Yes," Babe answered enthusiastically. "By all means." Babe had never met the famous Master Bard Destiny Dreamweaver, student of the great lore master and Master Bard Noman Manyfriend. It had been through these two heroes that the Battle of Azorn had come to a close and peace returned to the desolation. Noman and Destiny had been responsible for the liberation of the Kobolos and the historic decision to grant them citizenship. The last thing that Babe knew, Destiny had gone to Azorm after the death of Noman Manyfriend, where he taught and worked to restore the ancient academy to its former glory. What was he doing so far north? Babe couldn't guess. Babe threw more logs on the fire and greeted the famous Master Bard warmly, offering him hot tea and a seat next to him on the stone bench next to the huge raising blaze. Destiny was a handsome and charming man with big green eyes and a broad and friendly face. He spoke with an island accent from his birth in the South Seas. Mandolare spoke with a similar accent from another island, but Destiny's voice was full of charm as he spoke, with much laughter and always a smile. His eyes sparkled with a light within, and even the worst of life was mellowed by his charm. "Nice to finally meet you," Destiny said, sticking out his big hand and grabbing Babe's wrist. "I have letters for you, lad, from whence for your pal Mago. Is he here somewhere?" "The lad there said Mago'd gone to Azoth, but I came from there, and he isn't to be found. Mandolare left there weeks ago, and hasn't been heard of since." Babe suddenly felt that he knew where Mandolare was. Babe saw it in his mind. Mandolare was lying wounded in a bed, and Babe knew where it was. It was Bard's site, and it happened to Bards, who have had a strong connection. Babe even felt the connection to the spirit of the man whose likeness stood in the garden, the dearly departed Master Bard Tenor Songweaver, as if he were now showing Babe this sight. Babe spoke out of the vision as if from far away, in a slow, mystical whisper of one describing a dream. "Mandolare is at the Temple of Coral in Clayhorn lands. He's been wounded, like Tenor, in his head." Destiny did not dispute the claim. "Whence he be praised," he said instead. "He's alive. We feared the worst. Let's hope your Bard sight is true." "It is," Babe assured him, "and I feel I must go to him." "Yes," Destiny nodded his agreement. He held out the letter. "Take this letter to him. I'll return to Azorm, so send me messages there if you need me. Master Lau, he's the hermit below Azorm, waits for me there. If you need help or wisdom, seek him out. You know him, Lord Clayhorn. He is your former governor in Oslof, Vance Q. Vance. But he's been transformed into a dragon lord now, like Lord Dillon, and he has much to say about the troubled days to come. He says we must prepare for the worst, an invasion of demons. But then he laughs and says, out of the fire and ash of war, a new star will be born in the heavens." Babe's face fell when Destiny saw it, when he said the very words from Babe's nightmare. After telling Destiny his dream, they both felt a new sense of urgency, and they packed quickly and mounted their horses and rode off to meet the challenge and their greater destiny. Babe rode south with Destiny until they came to a parting of the ways just north of Aslef at an inn in the center of a small farm village. There, at Northwell, they spent the night together, and a few folks at the end were delighted by the tales and songs that Destiny played on his auto harp, a magical stringed instrument that played like a whole band. Destiny sang his famous song in Kobolos language that won the hearts of the Kobolos and their king. He spoke of his time below Azorm and of the golden future that waited beyond these dark times. News spread through the town, and soon a merry gathering feasted together around the fire. Babe, as the Clayhorn Lord, was known to many of the locals, and Babe shared his many folk songs and poetry and told tales of Tenor Songweaver. Babe was treated with great honor by the townfolk, who called him milord, and were honored to see to his every need. The Clayhorns were famous all over the empire for their goddess weed, but in Tyrone they were held in even higher esteem. The Clayhorns had farmed the fertile fields of South Tyrone since before it was called South Tyrone. The Clayhorns were the first pioneers who came to the mainland after the Dark War. Later, House Vandermas was founded and a castle built on the long lake in the north. Far to the south, in the rolling hills and fields, south of the North Woods, was Clayhorn Manor in their lands, a great rambling 4-story ranch manor house with barns and outbuildings where they maintained cattle and horses. The great manor was surrounded by acres and acres of farmland growing vegetables, fruits, and many, many huge fields of the best goddess weed in the empire. A few miles away from Clayhorn Manor was the Temple of Corlin, built by the Clayhorns as a school and a hospital, as well as a place of worship of Corlin, the mighty father god of Coralia. It, too, was a great wooden structure with a large, square, round center with 4 wings surrounded by stone walls and gardens and fields. They all stayed up late into the night, sharing songs and poetries and tales around the fire until the blue began to glow in the sky of the approaching dawn. They awoke rather late in the morning, and after a hearty country breakfast, they bid each other farewell and promised to keep in touch by letter and to come one day to visit when they can. Babe continued south while Destiny rode away into the west, seeking the desolation in Azorn. Babe planned to head to Asleth first to rest at the Songweaver School and report to Cedar Startune, Bard and Governor of Asleth. Cedar was Megaleer's best friend and would want to know that Megaleer was recuperating at the Temple of Corlin in South Tyrant. Babe took the west road toward the city, but soon saw that the road was filled with many people coming from the city. They were told tales of a siege of Asleth by Red Realm demon dwarves, one old man said, his fear and distress leaving no doubt. A wounded soldier, a tyrant trooper, told of 4-foot dwarves with crossbows, thick broad swords and bright shields, and red-plumed silver helmets with iron breastplate armor and red capes. Babe came into a roadside camp set up to treat the wounded. Babe dismounted and stood, taking in the tragedy. A woman stopped to see if he was injured. "What has happened here?" Babe asked. "It is war, dear Lord Clayhorn. The city is on fire. The demons came out of nowhere and overwhelmed the Tyrant garrison. The soldiers say they are fierce and untiring. Some say they are dark and swarthy dwarves. Others that they are a skull-faced horror from the Red Realm. All I know is that the burns and slice and stab wounds are real." She hurried off to see to the wounded. In an instant of bard sight, outside the flow of human perceptions of time, Babe Starseed Clayhorn saw Master Bard Tenor Songweaver, his spirit floating in an amber-colored bubble from the Bard class Cremenium gem. Tenor was looking sadly at the carnage, walking past the dead corpses along the roadside, and then among the wounded on stretchers in rows. Babe began to sing spontaneously out of the inspiration caused by the vision projected from his bard clasp. The earth children sing of the peace of the forest, silent but for the wind in the trees. The mystics sing of the realms within and the love and peace that passing brings. I saw her dancing in the clouds, I swear, on the day after she died. A long, sad trail of soldiers passed into the mists of history and were gone. Heal the wounds of their children and the wives and lovers left behind. Heal them, Lord and Lady, from the wounds of murderous times. Their duty done, they are no more. The young, fresh hope of tomorrow. They sold their souls to yesterday by fire and smoke, ransomed to memory by knife and fist and fire and sword. Let them rise again to bring the world the rainbow warriors of peace, that one bright day may bring an end to war. The amber light burst from Babe's own crystal and filled the whole area with its unworldly glow. The wounded were instantly healed of their wounds. The sliced and slashed bodies of those still living stopped bleeding, and the pain of their injuries went away. The dead were left in peace. The men and women serving the wounded shouted for joy as the soldiers rose and shouted their hearts out for the instant relief. They all started talking at once and looked to where the bard starseed Clayhorn was standing. But in the initial commotion that followed the healing, Babe had slipped away and mounted his horse before being besieged by the grateful soldiers and their amazed caretakers. Babe urgently rode south into lands he knew better than any, his own Royal House Clayhorn lands in South Tyrant. He rode the well-known roads toward the Temple of Corlin, where he knew in his heart he would find his friend Mandolare. He was on the way to the Clayhorn Manor House first to see his eldest brother, when he was attacked from the woods by a squad of the red-caped dwarves. They appeared quickly out of the shadows of the woods by the side of the road just after twilight. They came on fast until Babe took out his sword, and they stopped when they saw that he was armed. They all stopped at once and drew their short swords. They were very short but broad, and although they only stood between 4 and 5 feet tall, they were manically fierce and worked together as one. They all had dark skin and black eyes and hair. Perhaps it was bard sight, but Babe thought he could see that in the dark after sunset, their dark eyes seemed to shine out with a red glow. They carried rectangular shields with some kind of skull face in the center. They drew together in a pack and slowly approached, step by step, protected by a screen of shields. Babe stood bravely with his sword drawn and warned them of his bardic powers. "I am a bard of Corellia and a lord of these lands. I will not be attacked on my own land. Withdraw at once, or I will show no mercy." Babe heard a laugh from behind the shields, and their thick, short swords began banging on the shields. They stopped banging and laughing and quickly withdrew due to a sudden thick volley of arrows that came down out of the shadows and fell among them, dropping one of them before they could retreat. A large troop of 30 cavalry soldiers came galloping out of the trees, pursuing the company of dwarves back toward Aslef. The horse archer's leader rode up with his aides all dressed in the blue and white uniform of Clayhorn colors, with the white broad hats they all wore. The Clayhorn battle flag, emblazoned with the goddess leaf and cow skull of House Clayhorn, fluttered in the glowing summer breeze by their side. The officer was Elder Clayhorn, Lord of Clayhorn Manor and Babe's eldest brother. He was the leader of the Clayhorn archers, made a colonel by the Grand Duke Elder Tyrant, present Lord of Tyrant lands. The Clayhorns were close to the Tyrants and swore allegiance to their northern neighbors as an honored ancient royal family as a southern province inside Tyrant lands. The Clayhorn archers always fought for House Tyrant in time of need. The brothers greeted each other warmly. "Let's go home, Babe, and share a pipe." As they rode toward home, Lord Elder continued, "There's a war on here, Babe, and we know nothing about it. Some say they are demons from the Red Realm, others that they are Padash warriors from the far, far east, or a rebel troop of Delvane dwarves from the Gascad. We don't know. Aslef was attacked 3 days ago. These damn squads of demon dwarves, or whatever they are burning our fields and attacking the north-south road out of Aslef. They've laid siege to the city, and I fear they're burning it down. We've had no word from Aslef, and we can't even get close." "What about the Tyrant garrison at Aslef? They're 5,000 strong." "Half the Tyrant army is in the west, in Durandhaven," Elder explained. "We know nothing of the Tyrant garrison, and we fear Aslef has fallen. We've been chasing the demon dwarves out of our lands, but there seems no end of them. But let's get home, and I'll tell you all about it. Thank Corlin you're safe, Babe." "Well, all thanks to you and the Clayhorn archers, brother. Those little demons were about to make me into meat." Babe laughed in relief. Elder told his men to search for the fallen enemy soldier. They looked for the body, but only found a scorched bit of grass where the creature had fallen. The archers escorted the brothers safely the rest of the way to the manor house. There were no other sign of the enemy.